Hi, everyone. Hopefully you can all hear me online and in person. So complete different presentation, and it will be not that long because I don't actually have a lot of answers. I just have a lot of questions. So my name's Nayana. I'm a PhD student at the Oxford Internet Institute, which is a department at the University of Oxford that focuses on social science of the internet. But my PhD is about digital storytelling. And this presentation is about something I've been thinking about a lot, which is not text, but orality and the internet. So what exactly is orality? Well, it's just speaking, really. But specifically, what I'm thinking about in relation to my PhD is my PhD is about digital storytelling in India. And oral storytelling, I mean, I'm going through this very quickly, but oral storytelling is a key tradition in a lot of Indian cultures and across Indian languages. It's, a method for preserving history, for recording the experiences and stories of various communities, and it's very audience specific. So the idea of in-person in-person storytelling as performance is that the story is told again and again orally, but not written down, such that through repetition, audiences and individual listeners kind of understand what the story is about. It's also very reliant on the space and the environment that it's in, and the individual audiences. The story doesn't stay the same from telling to telling, it changes a lot. And more recent, and yeah, as I said, it's impermanent, it's changeable, it's not locked down. The whole idea is that it is meant to be in flux. And something I've been thinking about is the, orality and the internet. Okay, well, I have been thinking about it, but it's not appearing on screen. Yes, okay. Um, so recently in India, in the last few years, there's been more of a push to archive and to digitize aspects of oral storytelling. So this is an example of a map where they've collected histories and stories relating to partition from 1947, which is when India and Pakistan were divided into separate countries. This is a really traumatic moment in kind of South Asian history. And there's been this realization in the last decade or so that a lot of the people who were alive to witness and to be part of partition may not be with us for much longer. So there's been a kind of idea to collect these, kind of oral stories. And I mean, this is just one really good example of ways in which that has been trying to happen. And obviously, in countries like India, where literacy levels, perhaps written literacy levels, aren't as high as they are in, for example, the UK, there's the idea is to collect stories in a way that is authentic to the people telling them and makes people able to share their experiences in a variety of forms. I think in non-archival use, we've also seen a growth in things like WhatsApp's voice note function, which is actually incredibly popular in India because it allows users to bypass the necessity of literacy and also the necessity of speaking in English. It's possible to use if you're bilingual or kind of multilingual, you can use the voice note function to speak and to resist the boxing in of language and of speech actually all together, because obviously voice notes capture more than just voice, they capture all kinds of sounds. And WhatsApp in general has a really widespread usage in India, and the voice note function is definitely a part of that. Okay, so broadly, I mean, this is a really big whistle-stop tour through that, but essentially what I'm thinking about is how orality and orality on the internet reconfigures intimacy and space and closeness. So right now I'm presenting to everyone and I'm sort of saying things dependent on who's here in the room. Um,
Nonsense things.
no
Thank you.
worries.
But don't forget this.
Oh yeah.
Uh, very odd. Okay, so I'm just going to share screen again, so we'll be on your slide, right? Where was your slide? There it is.
There we go.
I want to make sure the mic is back.
I could stand here.
I think you'll only be picked up by that one.
Okay. I want to be as close as possible to that if that's the.
Yeah.
you can take over now. Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Oh,
cool, no problem.
no. The Lego.
Cool. I hope for the people online that kind of came through a little bit. So essentially I was saying, how does orality reconfigure space, intimacy, and closeness? Okay.
Yeah, why don't you all turn off your cameras? That's a good idea. So we can keep the chat going.
Okay.
Yeah, please
Yeah.
share again. Oh, hang on, before you do that, sorry, let me just click.
Yeah, of
because-
course. Do you want to get in?
Thank you. Yeah, it keeps forgetting the microphone, which is not very useful. So we'll just do, oh, Yeti was still there. Yeah,
So this is the one that's actually live.
yeah. Okay, so everybody's got the cameras off now. Let's just hope that's better. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
No problem.
Really got Christmas.
Okay, so well, that I think has become clear. Let's skip past that. And I was wondering also, to what extent is orality the future in any way of communication on the internet? I've noticed in kind of looking into the way, you know, orality is used as an archival tool, or to think about the ways in which orality is a kind of state of being and a state of communication that we've perhaps left behind, certainly in many parts of the West. You know, Walter J. Ong talks about this a lot in his work about orality and writing as technology, is that true orality is quite rare. You know, the idea of true orality being more than quote unquote, I think it's textual taxidermy, where you just bring things to life that are written down. You know, true orality is thinking without writing. For all of us in the room, when we communicate thinking about words. So how does orality change, you know, for a truly oral culture? So is orality linked with a sense of past, or does it have some kind of future, you know, necessity in communication as well? I'm really interested in specifically these moments of orality and sound that go beyond language and beyond a specific language, and allow the kind of resistance of a uniformity in communication on the internet. But really interested to hear anyone's thoughts, questions. I know it's been a bit of a jumpy presentation, but yeah, I think that's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
I don't know how to. Okay.
I guess.
No, we'll start with.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Right there. So.
Okay. So yeah. So yeah.
Yes.
Good idea.
So Dave Millard again. So I was just thinking about sort of oral storytelling, and one of the interesting things for me about oral storytelling is this interaction word again. Is it's interactive.
Yeah.
And we've got very used to stories that are sort of ossified.
Yeah.
And linearized through novels and film and so on. But oral storytelling has this kind of interactive component. So I just wondered how important was that, and whether you feel that manifests in internet storytelling in a way in non-interactive technologies.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good point. I think the dynamic nature of storytelling, and that's what I was talking about with, it is audience dependent. You know, you look at someone's face, you see how they're responding, and you change what you're saying. You change, you know, an audience of children versus an audience of adults. And there's certainly examples that I don't have time to go into now, but of stories being kind of flattened for a more generalized audience because of this ossification, because they can't be audience specific anymore. And also this you know, a kind of storytelling that's meant to be experienced live can now be experienced asynchronously. Yeah.
Yep.
So, and that, you know, the idea of timing and delay also, I think, features in storytelling as well. We're not seeing things, you know, we're seeing something that perhaps a storyteller made months or years ago. And as we all know, our emotions change a lot, even on a kind of daily, hourly basis. So yeah, it is a sort of ossification, but they're also, as I hope I, you know, showed, huge benefits to this idea of capturing some aspects of orality that we might otherwise lose.
Wait. What we're going to do, Dave, you move over here, please. We're going to use this as the question chair. So I'm really sorry, but that's the only way people can hear. So Anne, since you have a question.
Yeah.
Can I form it up like
That's
that?
good because I just don't have to move around too much.
It's very intimate.
So yeah,
Welcome into the venue.
I know.
So I had two thoughts. I find this really fascinating because 100 years ago in Europe, this happened where lots of recordings were made of folk stories,
Yeah.
and also music, like folk
yes.
music. But it was very much as an archive, and I've been really intrigued as how we could bring this forward and build on it in the future. And it relates back to the previous talk about hyperlinks, because you can't do hyperlinks in recordings.
Yeah.
And so just personally, I've realized I've got hundreds of WhatsApp recordings,
Yeah.
voice memos, and they're all just archived in date order.
Yeah.
Whereas I want to use them for the future, but I can't hyperlink them all, so I don't know how to find each one.
Yeah.
And I guess there's no big question about that, but how can we use the oral recordings that we have in a way that means that we can immediately find the one that has the right keywords, if you like, rather than just they're all stored in date order on your phone or on your laptop.
Sorry.
I almost wish I had better answers to that because I'm not really a person who builds stuff. So if anyone has a great software or something that does that, please feel free to come forward. What I was going to say is that it's interesting what you talk about with archiving voice notes, because I think there are two kinds of archive that I've ended up talking about. One is this very deliberate trying to like capture people's voices almost before they're gone. The deliberate archiving of history. And then there's this sort of accidental archive that we build up when people send us voice notes and when we collect, and actually there are, I think, privacy considerations. And, an interesting thing that someone sends you a voice note, not really intending for it to be kept on your phone for years and years, but obviously you do have it for years and years. And this sort of unintentional archive that we build up of other people, I think is something that is a really interesting representation of daily life. And I don't really have answers to how, we can better link between it. But yeah, if anyone does, I'm so sorry, this isn't a very good response, but I was just thinking about this actually is a very bad response.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So if anyone immediately is like, obviously you should have said this, now is a great time to say that thing.
So it's Vince Cerf.
Yeah.
Let me just start by reminding everyone that many people think that the invention of language is one of the most powerful things distinguishing humans from other mammals in the world. And subsequent to that, of course, writing. Your mention of orality immediately made me think of something different from what you presented, and that had to do with dialogue and interaction and the question of the role of dialogue in the future of text. What we're seeing right now is a dramatic improvement in the ability of computers to carry on dialogue in a way that's semantically useful. And so I'm wondering whether you thought a little bit about how we interact with content, which could be other than text, I mean, images and everything else, with dialogue. And does that show up in the pantheon of orality, or you're primarily focused on the storytelling side?
No, I'm interested in orality in a wider sense, and that's a really good point. And I think what I mentioned earlier about the asynchronicity is an interesting aspect of internet orality. Someone sends you something, maybe there's a break, and then you can respond to it in a way that's quite different to a lot of human face-to-face interaction where you have to respond right away. You can't just respond to it when it's convenient for you. And I think this relationship with time really changes the nature of orality. Like you're not like what I talked about with primary orality, where you've almost written a response in your head before you get back to someone when they with the internet. And I think that in person we are much more forced to make spontaneous, right now what I'm doing, like spontaneous answers or responses to questions. So I think that is a really, I'd love to hear more about any of your thoughts about dialogue, actually, because I think that is something that's often missing, I think, from thinking about orality in the internet, because it is so often not a dialogue. It's a one-way stream of orality, as I think Dave was saying.
Of course, the primary point of the internet was to allow for the interaction to happen. We wanted things to interact with each other across this network. Let me just add one other thing. It has to do with the hypertext presentation that came up earlier. The term itself is self-limiting in a way. And what we want to do, I think, is to extend this to hyperx for many values of x. So I wonder what orality, imagery, databases, videos, all these forms of information could have associations and connections and links. And so an awful lot of the hyperx world is how our expressions connected to each other. And the idea of being able to use an oral interface to explore those connections is very exciting, because now I can have a dialogue with a system that knows about all those different media and can allow me to explore what the connections are between them.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I think what I'm saying is we're not trying to replace other forms of communication with orality. It's trying to build a fuller way to communicate with people that allows people for whom orality is the primary way of thinking and communicating, for that to be their method of communication on the internet. It's not a thing that we're going to see. I'm not saying we're going to see social media replaced by oral kinds of form of communication, but to allow as wide and as broad as, a sense of communication and dialogue as possible in all the different languages and non-linguistic forms of communication that people across different cultures have, which I think is something that we aren't very good at encouraging, even in face-to-face interaction. But it would be great if the internet could do that. And I think we have some of those capacities and capabilities already. There's a question online, but if you want to move.
No, there is a question, and we'll absolutely take it, even though it's Brandel again, which is never a bad thing. I'm just going to stop sharing, because that's a bit useless right now. We have to go back on sharing.
I think he's
Brandel.
on mute, I think.
Yes, I had.
By the way,
I didn't want to interrupt anybody.
most people in the room cannot hear you. So for everybody, please try to be relatively succinct so that the speaker can repeat the question. Sorry about that.
Okay. One of the features of orality, it strikes me, is that as well as being primarily oral and audio, it is also a system where the recapitulation of the message, the reproduction of what the message is understood to be, happens at every time it is retold. In the book Too Much to Know, they talk about the fact that early literacy needed to be transcribed every few decades or so, but that's still a period at which the message has the opportunity to be re-challenged and reconsidered in terms of whether or how it should change. And various religious practices have put down edicts to make sure that it remains durable. I'm curious about what an orality that is supported by such a bafflingly enduring substrate as digital media turns out to be, because orality, as we've understood it in the past, has been necessarily transient, whereas messages that are spoken now are very enduring. What are the differences that you see from that?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and kind of hopefully what I was talking about with this tension. So just the question was about how orality has historically meant that a message is repeated again and again, but it can change, time to time, or a story can change time to time. And that's allowed, and that's part of the formula, so to speak. But now, the digitization of orality means that things are captured. I think even the word capture is quite interesting in that sense. It can both mean to get something before it's gone, but also capture suggests a kind of pinning down and a domestication of something that's meant to be maybe living. I think maybe, as I said before, I don't think this is going to be a primary or only method of listening to people or hearing people. We can hear people in lots of different ways, and this is one of them. It hopefully doesn't mean that all, you know, oral storytelling becomes digital. I don't think it will do. I think just as all storytelling is not, you know, print, or all storytelling is not digital, you know, all orality is not going to be digital. So I don't think it necessarily impacts the practice. But it does, I think, create a wider question of what is, like, are things permanent that perhaps were meant to be impermanent? And certainly in religious capacities, so the Vedas, which are like the Hindu historic text, have always primarily been passed down orally. It's only quite recently they've been written down, and the belief has always been that in communicating them orally, that's where they get their strength, and that in chanting them, that's where the religious meaning of the text is known. Yes, sorry. So I'm going to finish there, but yeah, it is a tension, I think, and I'm very happy to talk about it some other time. Thanks.
Thank you very much. No,
Thank you.
okay, so we're going to try to switch.
Oh, someone was just typing a question.
Oh, okay.
That's okay.
Yeah. I'm going to try to turn on live caption as well as open up Livia's presentation. Downloads. That looks correct.
Yeah.
So does anyone remember how to turn on the live transcripts?
Choice of the bottom here. There, show captions.
Show captions. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. Oh wow! It actually got it. Yeah. Very good. So that should be better for us in the room when the onlines are speaking. And I will reduce people in the room online to this. Okay, everybody can still hear us online, we hope. Okay, and Livia, over to you.
Yes. Okay. All right. So